Yeah, it's why I've become so interested in myth, which is like the worst word in the world because it implies falsehood. But you realize that myth speaks to like archetypal hidden forces and trends. And so actually, when you hear a myth, it lands in your body in a different way to like a news story, right? They're just fundamentally different things. And you realize after a while that like that one of the hardest things for me recently, the last year or so, I've been in really deep water, like with the esoteric stuff, with like psychic phenomena, like all of this stuff, which I'm increasingly believing is scientifically supported based on the research of a lot of my friends who I really trust. But I have had no real direct experience with, aside from a very brief period of being precognitive around my awakening experience, right? So like the door is like a little ajar in terms of me thinking that like, yeah, this stuff's real, but determining where it's real is really, really hard for me because you know, openness is the number one trait related to wisdom. But if you're too open, your brain falls out. And like, I'm now trying to say, like, if I encounter some esoteric myth about how the world was really formed, or Atlantis, or the ancient Egyptians, or whatever it is, right? I'm like, okay, does this story resonate with me? Why does it resonate with me? Does it reflect something in my inner world that I need to address? And if so, is there anything I can do about it? Right? Like, okay, so the world is ruled by lizard people, right? Okay, so like, is that true? Don't know. Am I ever going to know if it's true? Don't know. What does it reflect in me that I'm interested in the world being ruled by lizard people? Maybe I lack agency, right? Maybe I require convenient explanations for things that are chaotic. Whatever it is, right? Like, I don't actually believe the world is ruled by lizard people, but just thinking about like the most extreme examples of weirdo conspiracy theories, I'm like, what do they reflect in the world? What do they reflect in my life? And does my body say this is true? Because I'm not an embodied person, as you can tell. Like, I'm an intellectual weirdo. And so like learning to drop into my body when I hear people say stuff and I hear stories has been a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because the mythical lens, like, you know, that's how you kind of look at dreams too. They're symbolic, right? When you have a dream about something, the way people usually want to interpret a dream is like very literal, like, oh, this person died in the dream. Oh my God, this person might die. But it's what is that their death representing for you symbolically? So it's interesting how you can take that same kind of symbolic lens towards different things and different ideas and beliefs and things that pop up. Like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean about my own psyche of how I relate to the world?
Dude, I'm doing this series right now, an 8-part series of basically taking people from like hyper rational to a little bit more woo, but based in like practical suggestions rather than just like, hey, UFOs. And the DreamWork stuff has been the biggest incremental for me. And there's one thing that happened that was like, so I had a dream that me and my wife were sheltering in the house, and there was something really scary trying to get in. And someone had told me, "You're everything in the dream," right? And that idea blew my mind because I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm the scary thing trying to get in." And it was at that time, this was like a couple of weeks ago. And at the time, I realized that I was going to be exposed to something really scary in my own shadow that I hadn't really ever coped with, and that I was actually preventing that from getting in my own behavior, and actually extending that. Like, I've always been told, yeah, we're all one, yada yada yada, and it just hasn't landed for me in any plausible way because like, that's just not how I live my life, that we're all one. Like, I try and be compassionate, but that's about as far as it's going to go. But when I suddenly thought I'm everyone in the dream, and now I try and apply that to people symbolically, like if everything's a metaphor, that guy that really pisses me off, he's me, right? He's me in the dream. Like, I've understood that as a shadow work thing, but now I'm like, oh, like if this is all a dream and I'm everyone in the dream, what does it mean that I really don't like that person? And that's, I know that may not sound weird to anyone listening, but like that's been really interesting to me.